because he's 12, but he's now enough.
Yeah.
So that we've got 6, 7 people in the waiting room. So I think I'm going to open up the door.
Okay.
And
I
did want to
you guide me and I'll follow.
I wanted to pull up a quick bio to introduce you.
Oh, thank you.
Go. And I'm going to open up the doors. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us as you make your way in. Find your cup of coffee, find a good seat. If you have your lunch, this is still Lunch and Learn, so you're free to eat it while we are learning together. I just want to make the announcement I make every time, which is that this is being live streamed and being recorded. And so just keep that in mind for yourself as you do whatever you decide to do while you were on mic and on camera. I'm really excited for our conversation today. We have had 2 really good weeks of conversation learning about how the Jewish tradition might inspire us or guide us to think about questions of sex and gender and sexuality and gender orientation and gender identity over the last couple of weeks. Today is going to be a parallel, but I think a very, very different type of conversation. We are privileged this morning, I guess I should say this afternoon now, to welcome Robin Schwartz from Equality Florida to have us a conversation more about what's going on today in our community, what's going on in the state of Florida, what's going on from a policy perspective, what's going on from a legal perspective. And as the question that I always want to eventually get to is, and what can we do about it? And how can we as a community organize together to make our voices heard? So Robin Schwartz is one of the founders of the Aqua Foundation for Women. From 2010 to 2014, she served as the executive director and then managing director from 2018 to 2019. She is currently a mortgage loan originator and the chair of the LGBTQ advisory committee for the city of Miami Beach. She lives in Wynwood with her dog Stella, but she's coming to us as the Miami Development Officer for Equality Florida. So what we're going to do is I'm going to hand it over to Robin, and she's going to talk for a little while. I'm going to ask you to hold on questions, at least at first. If you want a place to put them, we can use the chat box as what they called in school, the parking lot. If you have a question, you can put it in the chat box, and we can parking lot it there, and we'll make sure we can get to them along the way. Robin, we are so thrilled to be having you speaking with us today and welcoming you and Equality Florida into the Temple Bethel community. So thank you so much, and take it away.
Thank you so much. This is a great honor to have this opportunity to speak with all of you today. Hi, everybody. I'm going to say a specific hi to Tracy. Hi, Tracy. Haven't seen you in a while. So nice to see all of you. So I think what I'm going to do today is just give you a quick overview of Equality Florida so you have a general understanding about what we do. And we can speak a little bit about, after that, what some of the, the greater challenges are at the moment. And then I really love question and answer type of things because I want us to have, a conversation. So Equality Florida is the state of Florida's LGBTQ organization. And we're actually either number 1 or number 2, the largest organization of this kind in the whole country. It's been around for a long time, and it's led by our fearless leader, Nadine, who does an amazing job. Generally speaking, we do everything you can think of to try to make life better for LGBTQ folks in the state. More specifically, we have a variety of different departments and programs. So I'll just go through each of them in no particular order. We have an HIV department, which works on advocacy for folks who have HIV, as well as trying to modernize the laws around folks that have HIV. We have a trans advocacy department for all things affecting the trans population. We have probably one of our most popular programs is called Safe and Healthy Schools. And it's a program that works to make the lives of our young people within Florida's school system so that they can have not just a safe time in school, but also flourish and have all that they should. So that happens through our team meets with the superintendents, with the teachers, with the principals. They do trainings, they work on policies, they work on
Monday.
Discrimination or bullying. They'll work with that family. Everything that you can think of, they do. And during this time of COVID, it's been particularly interesting, and I think they've been of great value because our young people, a lot of them may not have welcoming homes, but when they would go to school, they would at least have a place of refuge, if you will. They also sometimes had the support of the counselors and the support of their friends. And a lot of that was missing during COVID. So Equality Florida's team stepped in every way that we could to support them during that time. And then what we're probably best known for is our work in Tallahassee, which is basically around making sure that bad bills don't get passed and continue to work on good bills like the Equality Act to get them passed. And we've had a really amazing record in that, except for this year, for the first time in countless years. As you probably know, there was a bill that was just passed prohibiting young trans women or girls from participating in sports. Well, sports on the team in the way that they feel is appropriate. So that's been a very discouraging sign, and to no surprise based on the political climate that we're in. So we do that work. We also do endorsements where anytime there's an election coming in, not anytime, most times when there's an election coming up, in most cases, we will endorse candidates to help people who care about equality so that they don't need to do all the research. We do it for them. And when the time comes, you can just say, oh, who did Equality Florida endorse? And at least in the arena of equality, you'll know that they support what matters. And trying to think if I'm missing anything. We also do events, which are fundraisers a lot of times, but not always. Sometimes we just think, hey, the community needs a chance to get together and in a safe space to be able to be with each other. So we do that as well. So that's the overall programming. We do a little bit of work also around reproductive rights and around racial justice as well. So we're busy. Our crew is busy. Any questions on that? I see you, but I see you very little, so I can't tell. I guess, Rabbi, you'll tell me if anyone has any questions.
I have like 100, but I think I don't want to get in the way just yet.
Well, basically, I mean, I think that gives you an idea. I would say that at the beginning, when you did your introduction, you said, what's going on now in particular and what can you do? So I'll address that. As you know, LGBTQ folks as a whole have really achieved great strides, and we're very proud and happy of that. Unfortunately, that doesn't take away from individuals and corporations and entities still discriminating against us, unfortunately, on a daily basis. So there's still much work to be done there. I will say that the focus at the moment, the spotlight, seems to be on the trans community. What I'm about to say is my personal opinion, just to clarify. I believe that, you know, certain folks, they are attracted to what is the easiest to get their base riled up, right? And right now, because of all the strides we've made, and because of our visibility and our folks like you all, we're able to. I think bashing gay people is not as easy as it used to be, at least in public. So now they're going after trans people, and there is a ton of misinformation around trans folks, and I'm never upset at anyone who doesn't know, because it's not something that a lot of us have come in, it's just not been in our radar, right? So not knowing is okay, but using that not knowing to hurt people, that's not okay. And I think that's what a lot of our current politicians are doing. They're using the fact that folks don't understand to create a false narrative and use that false narrative to support laws and statements that are extremely hurtful to our trans community. And so if someone says to me, what can you do? I would say that the few things that come to mind quickly is obviously support any organization that's doing this work, whether it's financially or in a volunteer. There's ways, at least with Equality Florida, you can be part of a team where we do texting of folks, we do calls to our politicians, we do meetings with elected folks. Those are all things that you can get involved in. And then I would also say on an individual basis, what you can do is be the advocate in your world, right? In your sphere. So when you hear somebody say something that doesn't quite feel right, speak up, speak out. Even maybe when you don't hear something, maybe just be the creator of a conversation around around trans folks and LGBTQ people in general, and try to, open up people's minds and teach them. And then also, I would say that some of you probably are pretty influential. And if you have connections to folks in power, elected officials in particular, but even folks like in power in different corporate organizations, people who have an opportunity to lead, if you can reach out to them and let them know that you support this community and that this bill in particular is horrendous and hurtful, that is also another thing that you can do. So I think I tend to kind of be concise, so I hope I'm not being too concise, but let me know what else I can talk to you about or answer.
Jeff.
Hi, Robin. Thanks for being here and doing the work you're doing. And hi, all my friends on the call. I'm curious, Robin, as a parent of a 19-year-old who graduated high school last year, who has progressive parents and has always grown up in around progressive people, I am pleased to see him and his friends could care less about someone's sexuality. And I just think it's embedded in them. And I'm curious if your organization is seeing that kind of across the board in youth, or really only in progressive communities, progressive families, so on and so forth.
Yeah, good question. So I don't personally work directly with young people, but if I had to take a guess based on what I do here, unfortunately, there's still a lot of young people who don't subscribe to what you just, they're not like your kids. And look, it's no surprise, right? The kids are what their parents create. And especially in the middle of the state and the upper part of the state, there's still quite a lot of discrimination, unfortunately. And yes, it does boil down to the kids as well.
I have a bunch of things that I was hoping, Robin, that we could talk about, but I want to make sure that there are those in the group who, if they have any questions they want to bring forward, now would be a good time where I can go to my list of things. This is what they call in school. Oh, go, Philip. Go ahead, please.
Now, one thing I read in the Sun Sentinel today, which I read every day online, is that now DeSantis, why he sticks his nose in this, I don't know. But in Sarasota, they wanted to have rainbow lights on the bridge or something. What business? How can he legislate what a local government does? I don't understand how that could even be.
Yes, so I'm pretty sure that the bridge in question is a federal bridge.
Oh, I couldn't imagine why that would be any of his business,
Yeah, exactly. So within each city, even there's, city, county, federal. Yeah.
A similar thing happened last week in Jacksonville, where they lit up the bridge the first night of Pride, the second night it was blue, and then by the third night it was back. And the question of who has the authority there is right. And we know, and I'll say this, I'll say this because I can. This is not an endorsement one way or the other of the governor, but it seems like the governor is not interested in supporting the LGBTQ community in a way that is meaningful. I mean, Robin, you mentioned earlier in the conversation about the bill, the bill that bans trans girls from participating in interscholastic sports as a reflective of their identity. That bill was signed on the first day of Pride Month on June 1st. That was not an accident. But I would love, if we want to, only because it seems to be the issue that is on, I think, of the most discussion right now, although there's some things I want to talk about later on. But I want to talk about this bill for a couple of minutes if we can, to help those of us who are here understand what it's all about and what it does and what it doesn't do, and for those of us who wish to see it not be law and not be enforced and maybe even get repealed, what might there be? So can you tell us what the bill does, and why it's so problematic? And I want to offer one grounding question that has been asked of me by people who know that I am interested in this conversation, and I think it's a fair question to be raised. And I know that there's a good response to it, but I would love to raise it, which is the question of fairness, right? The question that I get from certain folks who are not coming to this from a place of animus, right? They don't perceive themselves to be anti-trans, but they say, listen, it's not fair if you have someone who is biologically male participating against girls in interscholastic sports. There's a reason why we have boys sports and girls sports. And by the way, for the group, I'm intentionally using the word boys and girls and not men and women, because for high school sports, they're described as boys and girls because these are minors. These are children that we're talking about. These are not adults. So why is it fair for someone who is biologically male, a boy, to participate and compete against girls in athletics? I want to make clear that I'm asking the question on behalf of those who've asked me, but I would love for Robin to hear. I'll say that for the group, not so much for you, Robin, for the group. But I'm actually curious to know, a better answer than the one that I have to that question.
So that is, I think, the question, right? And some come at it from, like you said, from malice, and some come at it from just, I really don't understand, which is fair. I think that's a very fair question. I don't have a problem at all when someone asks me that. There's a few things. First of all, trans people have been participating in sports for years already. This is not a new phenomena, and there are rules in place, and they've been working. We've not really had. There's like one or two people who complain. Like has not been a big problem. There's also a scientific study that I have that I can send to you. I am not a scientist, and I'm actually not even, an expert. My job at Equality Florida is not to fight the bills. So I have some understanding, of course, but I'm not even the expert. But I read this scientific study that showed that, especially in the younger ages, that there was no advantage whatsoever. Because this bill's not just high school, it's also younger kids. So that's another piece. And then also what they're not understanding is that some of these kids are on hormones. So they're not, I think that's the hardest thing for a lot of folks to get, is that they're not, if they say they're a trans girl, they're not a boy. And that means a lot of different things. And biologically, it could mean different things depending on where they're at in the spectrum of transitioning. So I think the simplest answer is that we all want fairness, but we also want fairness for the trans young people who are trying to play sports, and that having rules around this, like some criteria, some structure, so that everyone feels comfortable, that's fair. And to my knowledge, that already exists. But having an outright rule ban that these young people can't play sports is horrendous. I mean, I know you didn't ask me this, but I have to just speak to the hurt that this causes to our young people. I'm sure you understand that sports in general is a very healthy thing for young people for a lot of reasons. But add on the fact that if you're a trans young person, you already feel so much hate from some people in so many ways. And here's this one thing you can do where you can be yourself and enjoy and feel good. And now you're being told you can't do this either. The rate of suicide is horrendous amongst trans young people. Trans even adults, way higher than any other group. And that's not by accident. They are being told every time they turn around, you're not good enough. You're not who you are is not okay. And that's just wrong. So to wrap it back is that questions are good. Understanding is good. Even having some, maybe I'll just use the word boundaries around what is okay. That's fine. But an outright ban that comes from a place of hate and misunderstanding and, quite frankly, lies, not good.
So my second question about this particular bill is a combination of asking you to be a fortune teller, but also a strategist, which is, where do we go from here? And what is the likelihood that we're going to be successful in getting to where we want to go? I'm gonna couch that statement with a couple of things that I have read about more recently. One is that there have been Supreme Court rulings that have suggested that transgender folk are entitled to protections, like many others. Where Bostock is, I think today might be the anniversary of Bostock from a few years ago. That's number one. And number two is, I know that last week the Secretary of Education, whose name is escaping me right now, has said that he is specifically going to be looking into whether and how federal law protects transgender athletes, because we know that Florida isn't the only state who has passed a law like this. There are many, many others as well.
Yeah.
But those are my couchings to say, Robin, what is Equality Florida doing? What are other ally organizations doing? What can we as a synagogue be doing at this point? I mean, we may have already voted for who we voted for in the House and the Senate and the governorship. So the law has been passed and signed. Now what?
Yeah. So I'd say it's like a three-pronged approach. We are, as an organization, we're working on education because, again, a lot of this is based on people just not understanding. So we're working on education. We're also working on just being vocal and supportive of the trans community and letting our elected leaders know this is not acceptable. And then the third thing, which is the one that I think is going to be the one that actually can reverse this, is going to be through the courts. So there are several organizations, I think HRC already announced that they're going to be bringing some suits around this. So there'll be a lot of legal action. And my guess is that it'll be through legal action that we can actually reverse it. But again, to my earlier point about just the overall LGBTQ community, even after we get rid of the bill, there's still a lot of work to be done. So that education and being vocal is still going to be so important.
And how can we do that?
Well, I'm going to go back to what I said earlier, which is in your private conversations, making phone calls to the electeds that you do know, reaching out to any leader that you know that can do anything. What you're doing is perfect because you are taking your your position at the temple and you're using it to spread this information and education. And if everyone did that, we wouldn't be in this place. So thank you so much for doing it, and just keep doing more of it.
Jeff, go ahead. I saw your hand.
So you had mentioned, Robin, that some of the work, obviously, your focus is the LGBTQ community, but that you had that the organization also works with some social equality or racial equality as well. I'm curious how that crossover looks. Because unfortunately, there are those who work on racial equality who don't necessarily believe in LGBTQ equality. So I'm just curious how that looks and how expansive the crossover of marginalized communities is. Yeah.
So, I mean, we use the word intersectional. The truth is there's lots of Black people who are LGBTQ, right? So, we believe that it's our duty as an organization and as individuals to do everything we can to fight racism. And to your other point, the fact that there is a high rate of misunderstanding within the Black community around LGBTQ issues, again, we go back to education. I mean, at the end of the day, it's all about, I think, it's mostly about folks getting to know us. I believe the reason that the gay part of the LGBTQ community is where we are today is because we came out of the closet. We came out and we let people know us. And now folks know that we come in all the same shapes, sizes, and personalities and everything that everybody else is, we are too, because we're really all the same. And so as people get to know us, that is what helps. And within the Black community, I think the more that we are outspoken and build bridges, the better that will be. Does that answer your question? I'm not sure I answered it.
It does, with the exception of, I'm just curious, do you get resistance sometimes from those who, again, believe in equality for some and unfortunately don't believe in equality for others? So I'm just curious if there's resistance there as well, or when you're working with people on equality, they're just about equality and it's not a difficult conversation. Yeah, so I would say that, when we're partnering with other organizations, it's usually pretty good, right? Because we're partnering with organizations that we're like-minded to some degree. And of course, we're always going to have pushback from folks within every community that push back on what we're trying to accomplish. And again, that's where I think the education and the getting to know us is going to be the most helpful. We'll never win everybody over because it's, humans are humans. But I do think there's the majority of people believe in equality. And once they understand that, they support our work.
Ken, go ahead.
Yeah. Robin, I wondered, we Marsha and I used to belong to an organization called PFLAG.
Yep.
I don't know if they're still in existence.
They are.
My brother, who's deceased, was gay in the era when it was really a major problem. He was in the closet for many, many, many years. And my son is gay. And when he came out to us, we reached out to PFLAG and we became members of PFLAG. And it really, really helped us, to understand the dynamics, of the gay community. And to this day, we are very, very tight with my son. And whenever we are together with, and he has, he's married, and he has a son, if through in vitro, fertilization, and we are together with all his friends, and the interesting thing is, the friends he has now all have children. And it's a very large community. He lives in DC, and he has a summer home in Rehoboth Beach, and it's just wonderful to see. The transgender problem has become the focus now, I think, because I think that's the easiest group to pick on, and unfortunately, we have a governor here who is, I'm not going to get into politics, so I'll refrain my comment. But I just was curious if PFLAG is still in existence, because they are a very helpful organization.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for being you, which sounds very lucky. Yes, PFLAG still is in existence, and we partner with them. One of our most vocal, transparent, parents of a trans young person is the head of one of the local PFLAGs. So yes, they're a very important organization. They do great work.
Just one other thing, when we were living up in northern New Jersey, and we would, on Gay Pride Day, we would march down Fifth Avenue. The groups that got the biggest applause was PFLAG. When we would go into the village with the parade, some of these kids, really their families just abandoned them. And when PFLAG would come by with our banners and everything, they would always applaud us and welcome us. So it's a great organization.
It really is.
So I actually would love to use that, Ken, as a jumping off point to ask a question of you, Robin, which is about the creating the networks of allies and groups that are sort of aligned in this conversation. And Equality of Florida is a statewide organization. PFLAG is a national institution that is made up of local chapters, and ours is based in Lake Worth. By the way, tied in with, I think they actually work out of Compass, which is the community center that sponsored the event that those of us who were together a few weeks ago up in Lake Worth were at. But my question for you, Robin, is we're a house of worship, and I'm curious, what, if any, conversation that you're aware of is going on and bringing houses of worship together, in terms of, what's the best way that we as a synagogue institution, that you have, I appreciate you've sort of lauded us for having this conversation, and we know what we have. We have a sense of resource. We have a voice in the community that, I feel like I know that we have, but I don't always know how to activate it and how to channel it. And it would be really, really great, I think, for a couple of different ways for there to be a faith-based conversation around this, because I think that it's something that, from my own experience in organizing the state, is actually that a lot of folks on both sides of the aisle are really responsive to the faith community. Even if they think they disagree on policy, they listen to the faith community because it's the faith community. But also, B, it's a place where I think that, using the example that Jeff raised earlier, if you got, for example, a community of color that has a faith leadership and a white community has a faith leadership, and there's relationship between those faith leaders, it can be the entree to having some of those conversations that will eventually move some of these issues going forward. So I'm curious, is there, what's the place for a faith institution to get involved in this work? And is Equality Florida helping to bring houses of worship together, or is there somewhere else that we can go to make that happen? Because as I look around the Zoom call, I think there's a lot of folks who would love to see Temple Bethel and other faith institutions working together on this.
Yeah, so you're completely correct that the faith-based organizations can play a huge role and have played a huge role in many of our fights throughout the years. And I know Equality Florida has convened folks in the past. I'm not sure, I have to check with them to see what our current status is, but let me check on that and I'll get back with you. Because if they're not doing it directly, I'm sure we know who is. And that way you can get involved in that work because it is hugely important. I'm writing a note, so I'm not looking at you. So I'll reach back out to you after this when I check with them and find out, what the next step can be to get you more involved. Thank you for asking.
That'd be great. Yeah, because it's about us, but it's also about the fact that most synagogues do a lot of interfaith work, and personally, I do that here in Boca Raton.
Right.
Not everyone that I work with is on the same page, but for us to be able to be the conduit to expand the conversation and to bring people farther along in the conversation. They may not even know about Equality Florida, but if I can be the person to introduce a pastor friend or someone at the mosque to this organization, I would, that's the type of work that I think we would love to be a part of.
Absolutely, absolutely. And this work is about getting into communities. And as we know, there's different groups, different communities. So faith-based is very important.
And Rabbi Greg, just to throw in, Tom Tifton, although retired, might be a good person to speak to as a pastor who left his church because of their stance on LGBTQ, how they feel about it.
So Tom is one of the people that I was thinking about. For those of you who don't know Tom is a recently retired pastor from First United Methodist Church in Boca Raton. Tom, unfortunately, is leaving the community. He's moving to Seattle to be closer to his family. But what Jeff was alluding to is that the United Methodist Church, which is an international church, is going through a very deep crisis right now, specifically around how the church will or won't be welcoming to the LGBTQ community. And there's a major faction within the church who wants to be warm and welcoming and open, inclusive, and diverse, and that means ordaining LGBTQ clergy and officiating at gay marriages, same-sex marriages, which tends to be the two issues of policy that are sort of on the front light of the conversation. And then there's a huge sector of the church that doesn't. And it's an international thing because UMC is an international church, and so you've got different power bases, not just around the U.S. but around the world. And we know that certain areas of the world are certainly less friendly, and so the church is probably going to end up splitting in two internationally over this. And there's going to be one group of Methodist people who are supportive and those who are not. But there are other churches in our community: the Episcopal Church, the Lutheran Church, maybe the mosques, other synagogues. Right, the conservative movement has certainly changed its tune as well. There are places where we can organize together around this that are not currently happening as far as I know locally, but I know I'll speak for myself. I would love to be able to see that happen. So Jeff, thank you for by the way, another pastor of the church also left and moved because they were not so happy with the local church here either. I have another direction that I would love, Robin, for us to explore, unless there are other questions from the group, which is not taking the focus away from the trans community, but maybe turning it around to say more generally, what are the areas of public policy that we should be aware of? And to give a little background, so we all know that same-sex marriage is now legal, right, in the whole country. But there are other areas where the LGBT community is susceptible to discrimination. Questions like employment, questions like housing, questions like access to public accommodation. So give us, if you can, as best you can, like, what is the lay of the land today? What are the areas where we feel like we have achieved what needs to be done, and what are the areas where there's still work to be done?
Right. So locally, there's many ordinances that protect people. But again, you can be here and then step over the line and now you're not protected. And then you mentioned earlier the Bostock decision, which that is a federal law that does protect, but it doesn't protect in all areas of life. So the movement is still to get the Equality Act passed, which would be a federal law that would cover all areas of life. So it's really simple, the Equality Act, the Equality Act, the Equality Act. We got to get that passed.
And what will it do?
It will, to my understanding, again, not a lawyer, but to my understanding, it will protect LGBTQ folks in areas of not just employment, but housing, public facilities, pretty much every aspect.
Okay. And that has passed, it's passed the House and is waiting for the Senate?
I believe that's where we're at, yes.
Not a good place to be right now.
Mm-mm.
I don't want to keep managing the
In all fairness,
conversation.
there are Republicans who believe in this. The question is, are they strong enough and bold enough to vote their conscience?
Right.
On that note, Robin, have you been over the last 4 years seeing things going backwards? 4 to 5 years going backwards, or?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And just since Biden's been in, and I'm not, just to be clear, this isn't about Republican or Democrat. This is just about specifically the two administrations. This administration's already reversed a lot of the anti-LGBTQ stuff that Trump had passed. Just for instance, trans folks in the military. That's just one that comes to mind.
There's a major meeting now of the evangelicals in Nashville.
Southern Baptist, right?
Southern Baptist. Do you know what's their stance? I would assume they are definitely anti-gay. I would think so.
Yes, I don't personally know, but yes, that's my understanding. Yeah. Not friends of equality.
Right.
It's mostly all white males. Nothing against white males. I see a lot of you on here. I love you, but
we can be problematic.
Sometimes, a certain type.
I'm glad to see that the conservative movement, has come around, because they were not approving of gay.
Right.
Because I had a personal experience like 20 years ago, being a member of a conservative synagogue, and I was president of that synagogue. And when my son came out, I read a sermon from a Reform rabbi welcoming the gays to his community, his synagogue. And I asked our rabbi if we could do something similar, and I got a negative response. So I'm glad to hear that changed.
A little bit of history. We'll cover a little bit more of this next week when Robin Eisenberg and I teach together on the history of the Reform movement and how we have interacted with the gay community. But it was in around 2009, 2010 that the conservative movement, and it was not uncontroversial at the time, and it also wasn't unanimous at the time. The way that the conservative movement operates is they have a committee called the Committee of Jewish Law and Standards that passes statements of position, and there were a variety of statements that were passed. If you think of it kind of like when a Supreme Court makes a ruling, there's a majority ruling, and there's concurring rulings, and there's minority rulings. Although the difference is that the way that the committee works is that even the minority rulings are followable, right? So when the rulings were handed down by the committee, the majority ruling was that was to be welcoming to LGBTQ folk into the seminary to be ordained as rabbis and cantors, and to allow for rabbis to perform same-sex marriages. And the minority ruling was that they don't and shouldn't and can't. And what that allowed is every institution, every synagogue, and every rabbi to make their own decision around it, right? Which is it's a squishy place to be, right? Because the movement essentially said to its membership, you can do whatever you want, which on the one hand was a big achievement for those of us who are equality oriented, because for the first time conservative rabbis could answer that question that Ken asked of his rabbi differently than before. On the other hand, it allowed for maintaining a position of, yeah, we're not gonna do that, and allowed for the perpetuation of what many would argue, myself, I'll be the first one to say it, to be homophobic in maintaining that position. I'm going to share one other quick anecdote on this. About 2 months ago, I taught a session of confirmation for our 16-year-olds at the synagogue. And one of the things we do every year for confirmation is we have a roundtable discussion of someone from Bethel, a conservative rabbi from the community, and an Orthodox rabbi from the community, all speaking together. And one of the questions that we talked about what was something, and each rabbi was asked to respond to this, what is something that you are not so proud of that your movement has done or is doing? And my conservative colleague, who was at the seminary in the 1990s, said this was the thing. The thing that he was the least proud of was how when he was a student, and he was, and we know that students tend to have a lot of opportunity to raise their voice, that he wasn't more vocal, that he really wished that he would have been one of the groups of students who had organized to say, we are not going to go forward with our studies. We are not going to go forward towards our own ordination until the school changes its tune around ordaining LGBTQ folk. And he seemed to carry, he carries the regret of not having the courage to do that those 20 some odd years ago, which I think is, telling in a lot of ways. The movement has certainly changed since then, but it seems to continue to be something that they are still wrestling with. And obviously orthodoxy is not there. While there are groups of Orthodox Jews who are LGBTQ who are coming together for support and supporting each other and exploring this, we know that the movement is not, the Orthodox Union certainly is not there in any kind of meaningful way.
I just wanted to circle back to what we were saying. First of all, hi, Robin. But circle back to what we were saying about the Equality Act. Florida senators need to hear from all of us to make sure that they're both primed to vote no when it comes to a floor vote. And the more that we can contact them and be in touch with them about our feelings of why they should vote in favor of it, I think that's really, really important. I don't know that we'll get anywhere, but it can't hurt to try. Also, the Florida hate crimes bill, which didn't pass again this year, does the bill that we're trying to get passed increases protections as well. And so both federally contacting our senators, but also contacting our representatives and state senator, our state representatives and state senators to pass the Florida hate crimes bill is also hugely important. So those are two easy pieces of activism. And I think most of you know me and definitely know Rabbi Greg, so we can help you do those things if you're interested.
Robin, we seem to have lost you, but you're back now.
Yes, my computer died. I don't know why, and I don't have time to figure that out, so I got you on my phone.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. What was the last thing you heard before you lost us? Or we lost
I
you?
think I was only gone for a minute, so
okay.
Yeah, I got most of it.
Okay.
I acted quickly.
So can we talk for a second about how we can be supportive of the work of Equality Florida? And I'm going to give the obvious answer, which is donations are always accepted, and that's one way to do it. But as you and I spoke in preparation for today, we wanted to talk about what are other ways in addition. I think that our community, we've got a lot of people who are very philanthropic, and that's always a really important thing to do. But what are ways in which Equality Florida or the partners that you're working with are giving opportunity for folks to use this phrase, to get their hands dirty? Sure. And who can we be calling, and how can we do that in hard in COVID, but in a cohortative way, in an organized way? When you feel like you're a part of something, what are some things that we can be looking out for?
Sure. So I'll just put out there generally, if anyone's interested in any things I'm about to say, please just reach out to me directly, and I will make sure you get connected with the right person to get you involved in the way that you want. So the ways that you can get involved is clearly donating, and that I can help you with as well. That's actually part of my job. That's always great, whether it's individually donating or if the temple wants to sponsor, we have events, all kinds of things we can do. We need money, obviously, to be able to do this work. But in addition to that, we also have a volunteer team, a really huge, a huge volunteer team across the state, and very well organized by our volunteer leads, our field director at Equality Florida. And what they do is a variety of things. First, you would reach out to me and I would connect you with them, and you would basically just sign up to be part of this team. And then what you do from there is up to you. So you'll start getting the emails requesting when we need volunteers, and you can decide when you want to do it and when you don't. The types of ways that folks do volunteer is we have a software program where we do texting campaigns. We have an email software where we do email campaigns. We have phone banking, I'm assuming you're familiar with, where you literally make phone calls out either to constituents and or elected officials. And then sometimes we even have opportunities where we're looking to have physical connections with our elected officials. So for instance, just say Marco Rubio or whatever. Let's just say we decided to get a meeting with him and we needed to bring 5 or 10 people in on that meeting. We would do an outreach for that. So if that's the kind of thing that you're interested in, you can let me know that. We'll put you on the list, and then we know who to reach out to for what. And then of course, all the things I've already discussed that you can do without Equality Florida, but the ones I just discussed are specifically through the work that we do. Do you have, Rabbi, you'll give them all my information, I'm assuming?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And I want to just add, if you have a question ever, today, tomorrow, next year, whenever, or if you have, even sometimes people call me because their cousin or somebody's coming out, they don't know who to go, anything related to the LGBTQ community, please know that I'm always happy to help. I usually am not the actual person who can resolve it, but I usually know who can, and I'm happy to connect you and be a resource in any way I can.
Rabbi Gray?
Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
I don't know if it's an appropriate, and I know there's that we're doing a series of these, and maybe another one is a more appropriate, but I know we have I'll call it a group. I don't know if it's at Bethel. I don't know if it's a task force. I don't know if it's social. I don't like, what is Bethel besides being an LGBTQ safe zone? What are we doing?
It's a great question. And Robin, I'm going to answer Jeff's question, then I'm going to ask you to say, what else could we be doing? Because it's something that, Jeff, that I think that we're exploring. Several years ago, a task force formed that is made up of some folks who are on the call today, members of our community, and some staff people, some who are gay, some who are straight, to sort of ask ourselves, what is it that a synagogue like ours, who is committed to the values of equality, but doesn't necessarily have all the experience and being, we are not the congregations in West Hollywood or Oakland or San Francisco or New York, where this is a part of the organizing principle of the community. But it's a part of who we are. That sense of warmth and welcoming to everyone, irregardless of who they are, is a piece of where we are. So we put together a task force to begin to explore what might we want to do. And the focus has been for the last several years predominantly on what do we do during Pride Month, right? What are we doing for Pride Shabbat? And if you look over the last couple of years, what we've done during Pride Month has certainly expanded. I mean, this year we've got, I think, 8 or 9 different opportunities, 5 of these lunches, a Pride service this coming Friday night. By the way, Pride Shabbat is Friday at 7:30 in person and online. Should be sure to join us. Participating in community events, going out of the way to, I shouldn't say that way, but making the affirmative decision to have a table at a community event to engender ourselves to the community, to communicate who we are, but also to hear from the community. Participating in the march this coming Saturday down in Wilson Manors are some of the things. There was a Pride 5K this past Sunday morning. I'm still in pain, by the way. I don't run as much anymore, and I'm still hurting from having done that. But so part of it, Jeff, is about just communicating that we are a place of warmth and welcoming. But the second piece of it that I am nowhere near satisfied in what we're doing, is to say there's more beyond that, right? There's a spectrum of being sort of ambivalent to welcome, to diverse, to inclusive. And going from being sort of passively welcoming to actively inclusive is, I think, the hump that we're working on. How do we get over that? And so having conversations with folks like Equality Florida and with Robin, having conversations with folks like Kesha. Kesha, by the way, does a really good job. They have a lot of resources that help Jewish institutions in particular examine a variety of different ways and things that we can be doing. And it's big things and little things, right? So the big things are like, do our clergy officiate at same-sex weddings? The answer is yes. However, if your website has a page about getting married and it says, we love welcoming husband and wives together under the chuppah, like that's something that we're actually not doing as much as we could be doing, because we make a presumption that everyone who's getting married is a husband and a wife and those kind of things. So retraining ourselves to think more broadly about how we use language, what presumptions we make about folks, those are things that that we are engaging with in the conversation right now. Tracy, you've been a part of this conversation from the beginning as well. I would love to hear what you have to add to Jeff's in response to what Jeff said.
I think you really covered it. I mean, I think that there's a lot of obvious stuff like having programming, but I think the last thing you said is hugely important, like some of the subtle stuff about registration forms and religious school registration forms and preschool registration forms. Are they asking for mother and father? Are they asking for parent one and parent two? Are they even more progressive and asking for, adult one and adult two? It's not assuming that somebody's a guardian. Like, so it's really all the underlying. It's obviously the loud stuff, like having Pride Shabbat and having this Lunch and Learn series. But I think it's a lot of the subtler stuff too, that we're making sure that we're not sort of heteronormative in our thinking and in our organizing and in our planning.
Tracy, I'm going to share something that happened to me at the Pride Marketplace a few weeks ago. I've shared this with a few people. So we had a table there. Why did we have a table there? We wanted to advertise that we were doing this programming. We wanted to be out in the community. We certainly talk with a lot of people who are Jewish and who live in Palm Beach County and who are looking for a spiritual home. And while there are a lot of synagogues around the community, some of whom specifically cater to the LGBTQ community, there are folks who aren't always so happy there. But someone asked me, I would say somewhat pointedly, are you really gay friendly? And it gave me pause, and it gave me pause because I had to, in the depths of myself, my answer was yes, but yes, we are, but we could be doing a lot better. And that's kind of where I think that we are today. And this is where having conversations like this are not an end, but actually a means, right? Learning how to think about what does it mean to be a welcoming and inclusive community, looking, to make new connections with organizations. I mean, I didn't know Robin Schwartz before a month and a half ago. It was more about who are the partners out in the field that we want to be able to bring into and build a relationship with. Who can we learn from? That's, I think, an important piece of the work as well. I'm certainly happy but not satisfied with what we are doing, which fuels the work that I hope we can be doing together. And if anyone wants to be a part of this conversation, reach out to me, because I would love to get a variety of voices around the table, whether gay or straight, hetero or cis, whatever, cis or trans. Like, I think the idea is that we want a plurality of voices in the conversation, so that nothing becomes too sort of tunnel vision. I think if the only people who are thinking about LGBTQ issues in the synagogue are LGBTQ folk, it's never going to be able to resonate in a larger community because it's too cloistered, even when the ideas are good. Philip reflected that the number of people on these lunch and learns is small. Yeah, it's disappointing. It's disappointing. This is a good sized crowd depending on who you ask. And that's why, Philip, I would say my only response is that we're not leaving the LGBTQ conversation just lunch and learn. Part of it is that you have to make decisions. Where are you going to ask for an audience, and where are you going to demand one? We're demanding an audience this Friday night at Shabbat services, right? We are bringing the conversation to the community, which I think is for the good. Might some folks wish we didn't do that? Maybe. Do I care? Not that much. Not that much. I think that they are the ones who need to hear it more. Brian's giggling at me. Listen, this is the work of a congregation, is to comfort the discomforted and discomfort the comforted. And that's a bit of this work as well. Jeff?
Do we have a board member on that task force?
Do we have a board member on that task force?
I think Jeff just appointed himself.
Well, I'd be happy to be that board member on the task force, and if not me, then I think one should be invited to be on that task force.
I think that's I think to Jeff, the answer is absolutely, you're right. We haven't done invitations yet. It's been more of a whoever wants to come kind of come, but I think this is where that notion of deliberateness is really important, right? Which is not to say, let's just let things happen. I have an idea, Jeff, that if you want to, I want to talk about offline later about who, if it's not going to be you, based both on sort of the structure of the board and also individual members' own background. We could talk a little bit. I have some ideas.
Yeah, I mean, and by the way, that intention, and maybe relating a little bit to what Philip was talking about of the size of the crowd, there are times where people, like when I heard about that group, I think it was a year ago when there was online Shabbat was the first time, must have been just about a year ago, and we had a Pride Shabbat, and I saw a lot of my friends. I didn't know that group was one that I was welcome to be part of. And this is somebody who feels welcome to be part of anything at Bethel. Bethel's my family. So there are times where, even in a lunch and learn like this, where someone might say, I'm not quite sure if that's my place because I am not that. I could be wrong, but that could have something to do with it. So that intention is important in everything we do.
I want to reflect and validate what you just said, because I'm sitting here thinking we haven't even had that conversation. I'm the only person who's been in those meetings who doesn't identify, who identifies as straight and cisgendered. We haven't talked about expanding beyond people who identify as LGBTQ in that group. So let me just validate, Jeff, that your own sense of unsureness, because I share it. Any last questions for Robin while we still have her before we say thank you and offer her a gift in a moment?
Can I add one thing to the discussion you were just having?
Please.
That I didn't hear. So Equality Florida does do trainings. So please know that if you want to train your board, because it usually starts at the top, that's always a possibility. And training on understanding this community. Also, I didn't hear anyone mention the bathrooms. It's probably been discussed, but how bathrooms are labeled can be make someone feel welcome or not. And then the last thing that sometimes folks don't think about is messaging with marketing. A lot of times, if you go to some website or the literature that's sent out, pamphlets, if all those represent only straight couples, straight cis-looking couples, and you're a gay person and you pick it up, or you're trans and you go online, you immediately don't feel welcome. So if you have not already, I hope that you'll look and make sure that every representation of your organization is welcoming.
Can I add one thing on that note, because it made me think of it, what Robin just said. Most of you probably don't know this, but I had the privilege of being part of the art task force that put together a lot of the art in the Schaefer campus. And if next time you're at the Schaefer campus and you're walking towards the sanctuary, kind of right across from the TV screens, there's a beautiful mosaic. And there's a family standing there. And our first iteration of that family was very obviously a man, a woman, and a child. And we intentionally changed it so that they were very, I don't know if the proper wording, but unisex, that they could be identified as two men, two women, a child, and what we kind of wanted to have somebody who looked like they were a grandparent or older person in that family. But it's kind of, so that thinking is there, but Robin, but it can obviously will always be better and should be better.
Well, it's new, Jeff, because it's the same, if you look at the mosaic at the Beck family campus, our preschool campus around the Welcome Center, it also has a family that is decidedly gendered. That was built 12 years ago, 13 years ago. And so our own temple's culture and conversation around this has certainly evolved over the last, and that's a good thing. that were, that we didn't make the same decision in 2020 or 2019 that we made in 2009. And there's always work to be done. Robin, my question for you is, are you familiar with this book, Mishkan Ga'ava, Where Pride Dwells? Have you seen this before?
No, sorry.
So this is a book that was published last year. It is a celebration of LGBTQ Jewish life and ritual that our Reform Movement published about 1.5 years ago. And I'm going to email you afterwards for your mailing address, and we're going to send you a copy of this as a thank you for participation.
Thank you. That's so sweet.
Today.
Not necessary, but so sweet. Thank you.
We used this last year for Pride Shabbat. We're going to use more in the coming weekend as well. So I want to thank Robin. Thank you so much, and Equality Florida, for your time being with us today. And thank you to everyone who joined us for participation and the wonderful questions you have. Our roadmap for the next 2 weeks. Next week is a conversation with Robin Eisenberg, a different Robin, but one well known to Temple Bethel, our Director of Jewish Living and Learning Emerita, and I are going to talk about the history of the Reform movement and welcoming the LGBTQ community. And then our last week is going to be a roundtable of the congregation and the community of what has it been like to experience Pride this month, and where can we go from here. So I wish everyone a wonderful afternoon. And I hope to see many of you this Friday at 7:30 for our Pride Shabbat, and this Saturday to march with us at the Wilton Manors Pride Festival. We'll be gathering at 6 in the staging area to march at 7. Reach out to me with any questions. I put Robin Schwartz's email address in the chat for everybody as well. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Robin.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a good one.